Today.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thanks for having me. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Today, we're going to talk about the lobes of the brain, what those lobes normally do, and what behaviors you will see once your person with dementia has their disease advanced enough to begin to attack the different lobes of the brain. Because each of the lobes do specific things, and we know this, recognizing the change in behaviors in your loved one also helps you track the disease and helps you come to the realization that no matter what you're thinking, everything your loved one's doing is actually being driven by brain damage. And so this is just a big step forward in terms of realizing that their behavior is not meant to be personal. It is not meant to be hurtful, and everything a person with dementia is doing is directly linked back to these lobes, including at the end of life when there begins to be difficulty with chewing and swallowing. Some of the things that I say today can be upsetting, especially if you're a family caregiver. You are under a tremendous amount of stress. And so the handouts that you have for this are called the Itty Bitty Dementia handout. And then there's also a handout of stress tips and things to do to help dementia family caregivers be able to reduce your stress levels. The death rate for dementia family caregivers is quite high. It is estimated that 2 out of 10 will die of stress-related causes as the result of care of a loved one with dementia. And remember, dementia is the terminal disease. So now that I've gotten everybody's blood pressure going, let's go ahead and practice a relaxation technique. What I want you to do here is learn how to breathe a little bit differently in order to help yourself calm down. Now, last month we did Greenstone's Awesome Icebreaker, which is where when you feel overwhelmed and stressed, you hold a piece of ice in your hand, shut your eyes and take 10 slow, deep breaths, and this will help your brain calm down. But you might not always have ice around, so I want you to learn how to do this type of breathing. This type of breathing is called meditative breathing or prayer breathing, and the count that I'm going to give you to breathe with is what we use to slow our respiration down to 13 breaths per minute. When you reach 13 breaths per minute, that is considered to be a meditative state or a prayer state for the brain and the body. Meditation, of course, is very good for you and me. It is the ultimate brain exercise. It realigns brain cell structure. It grows brain cell structure. It enriches the brain's structure. It will not work on your loved one because they have a disease that's destroying their brain. But meditation is the best thing you and I can do as we age. So the meditative breathing is you're going to breathe in to the count of 4. You're going to hold that breath to the count of 2. And you're going to breathe out to the count of 6. Now, it's important that you breathe out longer than you breathe in, because that very method of breathing in shorter and then breathing out longer tells your body and your brain that you're okay and that you're safe. And when we do this repeatedly, our breathing slows down and we reach meditative state. Today, we're going to take 4 breaths and I'm going to walk you through them. And then there will be points in the presentation where we'll all stop and take a deep breath, just because this is difficult information to hear. So with your feet flat on the floor, your hands in your lap with your palms up, this has to do with circulation. With your palms up, shut your eyes, and we're going to take a deep breath in, 2, 3, 4, hold, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Deep breath in, 2, 3, 4, hold, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Deep breath in, 2, 3, 4, hold, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Last time, deep breath in, 2, 3, 4, hold, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In just 4 breaths, you've lowered your blood pressure, you've lowered your heart rate, and you've actually begun to calm your brain. If your loved one is in a facility, when you go to visit them, breathe before you get out of the car. When you leave the community, breathe again before you get back on the road. If your loved one is still at home as you're doing care, if you get frustrated, step out of the room and breathe. If the phone rings and it's driving you crazy, breathe. You don't have to answer the phone. They'll come back. If somebody banging on your front door, breathe. You don't have to run there. They're not going to go anywhere. So learn to recognize that you are under stress. Try to identify the stress and just breathe. And that breathing technique will help you. Okay, so deep breath. Lindsay, here we go. As we get started, I want you to learn that if your loved one has anesthesia surgery, they will not come back the same. The typical step down for anesthetic surgery in a person with dementia in stages 4, 5, 6, or 7 will be that there will be a significant step down in their cognitive abilities. And the easiest way to help your family members understand what has happened is think about the brain as being a street full of potholes. When it finishes raining, water stands in the potholes. Your loved one's brain now is full of potholes, and if anesthesia is introduced into their body, the anesthesia puddles in the potholes of the brain and they don't clear it. That is the reason for the step down, and that's the easiest way to remember it. So as you're thinking about brain lobes, some of you are going to have loved ones who will do something that will require anesthetic surgery. You always want to ask the physician, is there another way to do this without that type of anesthesia? Is there a way to do a block? Because the end result will be that your loved one will have a significant decline, and it's due to the potholes. Okay, these are the lobes of the brain. You have one set on this side, one set on this side. You have 4 major lobes, you have 3 minor lobes. Each form of dementia, the type of dementia it is identified in part by where the brain is being attacked. So if, for example, the dementia is Alzheimer's, Alzheimer's begins in the top of the frontal lobe and the top of the parietal lobe in the motor cortex area, and then begins to move around to different areas of the brain. If it's Lewy body dementias or Parkinson's disease dementia, that dementia begins in the part of the brain that's purple and red back towards the green in the basal ganglia area. If the dementia is frontal temporal dementia, the dementia begins in the blue area and the red area in the frontal and temporal lobes, which is why it's named frontal temporal dementia. So the type of dementia a person has actually tells us where in the brain it is started. And because we know where in the brain it is started and the type of dementia it is, that tells us how it will progress through the brain, and that tells us what kind of behaviors to anticipate. Learning, however, starts with an area of the brain called the hippocampus, and right above it, the limbic system. For most families of a person with dementia, it is not until the disease actually reaches the hippocampus that you become convinced there's something wrong with your loved one. And the reason is the hippocampus is what allows you and I to learn information. The hippocampus is named that because it's Greek for seahorse, because the little green thing looks like a seahorse. Now, if you don't see the seahorse, try turning your head sideways. That's just a lie. I just like to see when I'm speaking live how many people will turn their head sideways. When you take it out, it really does look like a little seahorse, and I'm assuming everybody does know the seahorse is the one with the eyeball, right? All right. So the hippocampus is what allows you and I to make memory. And when we meet next month, we will go into detail about what memory is, how it is formed in the brain, and why your loved one is behaving the way they're behaving, and why their memory is where it is. But this is how memory starts. It starts in the hippocampus and the limbic system. And when the stimuli comes into your brain, whether it's through the eyes, through the skin, through hearing, through taste, through smell, any of your 5 senses, the hippocampus alerts to that information, determines whether you need it for just a few seconds, just a few minutes, whether you need it for a lifetime. The hippocampus then sends electric signals to the area of the brain where that type of information is stored, and the cells in that area of the brain get longer roots as more information is added to them. So in a nutshell, that's what happens with the hippocampus until the hippocampus begins to die. Most of us do not notice dementia in our loved one until the hippocampus begins to die, because your loved one will have a very distinctive behavior. And the behavior will be that they will begin to repeat information and ask the same question over and over and over again. So Lindsay, are you still with us? Everybody's gone to black.
Yes, I'm here.
Lindsay, I want you to tell me my doctor's appointment is at 3 o'clock, please.
Your doctor's appointment is at 3 o'clock.
Okay. Now you saw me nod my head. I'm making eye contact. And what does that mean?
That means that you're acknowledging that it's at 3 and taking that information in.
And a few minutes later, I say, when's my doctor's appointment?
It's at 3. Your doctor's appointment is at 3 o'clock.
You did great. Human beings around the world, we give you the answer the first time and the full answer. Your doctor's appointment is at 3 o'clock. The second time you ask, it gets shortened. It's at 3 o'clock. The third time I ask, when is my doctor's appointment? Humans explode. We're angry. We already told you that. And the tone in our voice changes, and we begin to get mad at our loved one because we're certain they're doing this behavior on purpose to drive us crazy. Why didn't I go to the party? How come you haven't fed me? And they're sitting in front of an empty plate. When is my doctor's appointment? Where is my car? Where is this? Where is that? Why is that? And you've answered that question literally 1,000 times today. And for most people, it has been upsetting to you. And the reason is people with dementia, remember, don't look sick until the very end of the disease. But what you're witnessing is an indication that there is significant brain damage, even though your loved one doesn't look sick yet. When your loved one is repeating information, asking the same question over and over again, it doesn't mean they're trying to get you back for something you did in high school. It means that the true amnesia of the disease has started, and it means that the hippocampus is now damaged, and eventually the hippocampus will not exist in your loved one's brain. And it won't matter how many times you tell them the name of the new baby, they're not going to be able to remember that name, not because they don't love that baby, but because the piece of the brain that makes memory no longer exists. And this is one of the biggest things that's painful for families to witness and painful to understand. When you begin to hear that questioning, it means that your loved one's hippocampus is now being attacked by the disease process. And when the disease process is over, this area of the brain no longer has tissue in it. It only has fluid. So everything your loved one's doing is directly linked back to the disease process and where it is in the brain. Now, the lobes, I'm just going to start at the front and go to the back and then go down. These are not in any particular order. The type of dementia your loved one has determines the order in which the disease will reach this lobe. But you will recognize, especially when you read your handout, because your handout has this in great detail, you will recognize these behaviors in your loved one. And no matter how they look here, remember, people with dementia will not look sick on their face until a pound of brain tissue is gone. So no matter what they look like here, if you're seeing these behaviors, it indicates the disease process is in that area of the brain. The frontal lobe is speech. It's one of the lobes that holds facial recognition. Facial recognition is what allows me to recognize my mother, my father, my siblings, my friends, my colleagues. Facial recognition. It controls rational thought, judgment, imagination, impulse control, memory, speech. Impulse control is what stops you and I from saying every little mean thing we have thought today. And if you think about it, you've seen impulse control before. And it was when you took your 3-year-old or your 4-year-old somewhere and they saw a person that didn't look like anybody they'd ever seen before. Your 4-year-old did not turn to you and say, "Mommy, why does that person over there, he seems peculiar to me. He looks so odd." Your 4-year-old didn't say that. Your 4-year-old said, "Mama, how come that guy is so," and before you could get down the aisle, across the shopping cart, across the dining table, they had spit out a word. Your 4-year-old did that because their frontal lobe was developing. Your loved one with dementia is now doing that because their frontal lobe is heavily damaged. Everything you're seeing is directly linked back to a lobe in the brain. The temporal lobes are hearing, language, smell, memory, another area of facial recognition, and language and speech are very closely connected between the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe. In the temporal lobes, the left side is formal language, the language you and I use when we speak to each other, the language we use around our family. The right side is forbidden words, curse words, ugly words, and singing. One of the greatest areas of trauma for a family is when their loved one who never missed a day at church, never missed synagogue, did all their things they were doing for their religious beliefs, and you've never heard that person use a curse word in your life, suddenly seems to only be speaking in curse words, but can still sing all the words to Amazing Grace. And for families, the most common thing that you think is, God has forsaken my loved one and they're going to go to hell now. Listen to how they're speaking. And in reality, God hasn't forsaken your loved one. This is part of the brain disease. These are things the brain is in control of. And once the brain is damaged, you will see that other behavior. In most forms of dementia, the left temporal lobe dies first, leaving the person with dementia using curse words or hateful or ugly, forbidden language, but can still sing all the words to songs. Because singing is intact, it again can lead a family member to believe they're doing this on purpose. And the reality is they are responding to what is still functioning in their brain. When the disease reaches the temporal lobes, this is called aphasia. Aphasia is the inability to use and understand language. This is not that somebody needs hearing aids. This is that the area of the brain that translates hearing and speech and language is now heavily damaged. That also means they don't interpret noise correctly, and they are not able to interpret the direction sound is coming from. The occipital lobes are the lobes in the back of your head. This is what translates for you what you are seeing. Now, this has nothing to do with my vision. All glasses do is make a muscle in the eye constrict so that what I take into my brain is in focus. The left eye goes to the right brain. The right eye goes to the left occipital lobe. These lobes also hold facial recognition. Now, when we talk about your loved one losing facial recognition, it's not me they lose. By the time I meet people, their hippocampus is damaged and they can't learn who I am. But you're the ones they're beginning to lose. And when they're beginning to confuse you with their daughter or their daughter with you, when they're beginning to lose family members' connections and who they actually are, it indicates that there is damage in the frontal lobe, the temporal lobe, and the occipital lobes, because these three lobes hold facial recognition. The occipital lobe is depth perception. It's my ability to have visual spatial, to be able to see around me. But in people with dementia, their ability to do that is changing because of damage in the occipital lobes. So as you sit at home today, I want you first to put your hands here. And I want you to notice what things around you disappeared the moment you did this. Suddenly you lost your peripheral vision, and this is what happens for people with dementia. This is followed by additional damage. So put your thumbs together, put your fingertips together. Your loved one begins to see things through a periscope. Now, when I'm looking at someone with dementia, I'm looking at how they're seeing the world around them. So when I talk to a person with dementia, if they turn to look at me, then I know their peripheral vision is damaged. If I see them eating lunch and I notice that they don't see their plate, which seems to be right in front of them, instead they see another person's plate and they will reach for that other person's food, that tells me there is advanced damage in their occipital lobes. From periscope vision, they will go to binocular vision. And as you do this at home, you realize that now you don't really see very much of what's around you. And in some of your loved ones in stage 6 of the disease, the right occipital lobe becomes so damaged that it turns the left eye off. And this is what your loved one sees. And when you look at the world this way, you realize that if somebody suddenly appears into your vision, it can make you strike out at them out of fear. It also means that your loved one does not see things as quickly as you and I do. Their brain needs more time to assimilate you moving towards them or somebody coming in their space. So the occipital lobe and the corresponding damage that happens are the reasons why, some of the reasons why your loved one may fall, why they bump into things. It is normal for people in dementia to be bruised from the shoulder down to the knees simply by walking into doorways, tables, chairs, couches, into the ends of things. When the disease has reached the frontal lobes and the occipital lobes, this is called agnosia. It's the inability to recognize common objects or people. That means things like the difference between signing a check with a pencil or a pen, Other things are going to brush your teeth and making sure your loved one uses the toothpaste and not the 9 other things in the bathroom that are also in tubes. And that includes hemorrhoid cream, hand cream, face cream, insect bite cream. There's a number of things that come in tubes. Agnosia means not recognizing people. And the people, again, aren't me and others in my profession. The people are people in the family. It's the inability to recognize common objects or people. It could be not being able to distinguish between a fork and a spoon. They're both very similar, but they're different. It also means they may be using the wrong word trying to explain something. And all of this means that the frontal lobes and the occipital lobes are heavily damaged. The parietal lobes are pain, touch, taste, and temperature. This is what tells the body it's in pain or receives most of the pain impulses from the body. This is where touch is interpreted. Touch is the last sensation that we lose. Your loved one in late stage 6 and stage 7 has a lot of touch activities that are done with them. This also runs the body's temperature, and in dementia, your loved one's temperature will begin to drop because of brain damage here. The normal temperature for humans is 98.6, and people with dementia from stage 5 forward, the body temperature becomes closer to 97 to 95 degrees. They really are colder than you and I, and that's why you may have noticed your loved one dressing in layers and putting on extra clothing, even though to you it seems very hot. Because of damage in the parietal lobe, people with dementia begin to crave sweet things and to crave chocolates and sugars. We give them the chocolates and the sugars, and if they're diabetic, we make an allowance for the diabetic and switch out. But because of this craving of sweets, it means that I can use Hershey Kisses to get someone to take a bath. I can use Hershey Kisses to keep someone calm while I'm bathing them. It also means we're going to use sweet things to flavor foods to keep them eating foods for as long as possible, but we're going to prepare to the point of where they begin to want to start their meal with their pie or their cake, whatever their dessert is. So it means that we do a lot of barbecue sauces, honeys, sugars, fruit juices, jellies, preserves, jams. We use all sorts of things to give foods a sweetened, enhanced flavor in order to help the person with dementia be able to taste the food and eat it. Otherwise, the person with dementia will taste their favorite food, and because they can no longer get those sensations of what that food is, they're going to accuse you, the caregiver, of not being a good cook, of not being able to cook correctly, of trying to give them bad food. When if we flavor the foods with sweet things, they will be more likely to take in their meal. When the disease reaches this area of the brain, there is now significant damage to the motor cortex, the premotor cortex, the hippocampus, and the limbic systems. These are the systems that allow you and I to stand and move in balance. And as these become damaged, your person is less and less likely to do that, and their fall risk becomes part of the disease process. Everybody with dementia falls, and it's due to this brain damage. When your loved one begins to have trouble with coordinated movement, this is called apraxia. It's the inability to coordinate large or small muscle movements, and the result is your loved one falls or they're not able to get food to their mouth. Is everybody with me so far? Let's all take a deep breath in. Everybody, deep breath in. 3, 4, hold, hold, blow out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Dementia doesn't just stop at the top of the brain. Dementia continues until there is no more life, and the brain runs the body. So as the brain becomes more and more damaged, this is why end of life occurs. This is why this is a terminal disease. Your loved one in stage 5 doesn't look sick until the very end of stage 5. In stage 6, your loved one begins to have more and more trouble with movement. They begin to be hunched over. They walk slumped over. They're now shuffling their feet, and you may notice a tremor. Now, a tremor makes you think of Parkinson's, but in people with dementia in late stages, that's not Parkinson's, but it's called a Parkinsonian effect because it looks like Parkinson's, but it's not actually related to dopamine. In stage 6 of the disease, when your person has that vacancy in their eyes most of the time, when your person has lost much of their language, but when they're still mobile, moving about, when they're still alert, but you pick up that there's a tremor now, it means that the disease has reached the medulla oblongata. When your loved one begins to have trouble with chewing and swallowing food, it means that the disease has reached the brainstem, and it means that the end of life is getting very, very close. So I'll take a deep breath in. 2, 3, 4, hold, hold, breathe out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because of damage in the brain, the 5 senses are damaged, and we went through part of this. So vision changes from 3-dimensional to 1-dimensional. The world around your loved one begins to look flat to them. There's not any depth in there. Peripheral vision is lost to periscope, to binocular, to monocular. And you may notice your person tapping a floor, especially if they reach something like an elevator, which has a silver bar in it. That seems to alert them. But dark places can look like holes. Before we had alarm systems in buildings, we would put a 3-foot black rug in front of every exit door, and people with dementia have a great difficulty trying to step across that because of visual changes in the parietal lobe or in damage in the occipital lobe. People with dementia see that 3-foot black rug as a hole. So you may see floor tapping as they try to make determinations. Shiny, waxy floors in hospitals to a person with dementia look like floors covered in water or look like floors that are shifting and moving. Hearing changes in it, and not that there is hearing damage, it's the temporal lobes unable to translate what is happening in the ear. So there's an inability to translate sound, to locate sound, to track sound, and especially to hear higher pitched voices. If your voice is naturally high pitched when you talk to your loved one, try to lower your pitch to give the brain a better opportunity to understand what you're saying. The ability to taste and smell sweet things remains usually unimpaired. And with touch, we see this. This is called pilling. This is a stage 5 behavior. This is a self-soothing activity. If your loved one is doing this, I would be talking to the doctor about anxiety medication. Also, if they're rubbing their thighs or rubbing their arms, those are also considered self-soothing behaviors. Or if it becomes a problem where they're doing it excessively, then it's an anxiety issue. Another thing that we see done with touch is the folding of material, either the folding of cloths, washcloths, folding of socks, folding of paper. It's not unusual to go into a home and find that a person with dementia took all of the Kleenex out of the box and neatly folded each one multiple times and put them in a drawer. Vision changes. Remember this when you're working with your loved one. As professionals, we always come from the front and we slow down to give the person a chance to recognize that we're there. You have to make sure that you're looking at that person in the eyes. Otherwise, they're not seeing you. One of the mistakes that we see commonly made is that professional caregivers lean over a person with dementia without realizing the person is seen right here. And on most caregivers, what they're actually seeing is the chest of the caregiver. And we call that boobs, bellies, and butts, that the person doesn't realize this is what the resident is actually seeing. So you may have to do some teaching of staff when your loved one is in a community. And that's the end of our sharing. So do we have questions? Colleen, do we have questions? Or Lindsay, do we have questions?
So I don't see any questions in the chat, but folks are welcome to come up on camera. In fact, what I can do now is stop the recording. So if anybody had any particular questions they want to ask, but maybe not for public viewing, that's possible. So let me stop that real quick.